My full name is LaVonne Clara Thies, Thies, and I married Presley, Presley. I was born March 28th, 1940, at Belmont Hospital in Chicago. My mother had to have a cesarean because she had uremic poisoning. She was 42 when I was born.
Oh, okay.
And my father was 43.
Yeah.
So they were a little bit older.
Yeah. And can you tell me the full name from your father and mother?
My father's full name is William Frederick Thies, Thies, and he was born in Schaumburg Township in Illinois on the farm that is on Meacham Road, and they called that the home place. My mother's full name was Clara Dorothea Maria Sophia Becker, Becker,
Yeah.
and she married William Thies.
Okay.
She was born in DuPage County. Oh, we're going to do this over.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't even think about that.
No. So. Okay.
From the beginning.
Oh, I have your name, I have your father's name, just your mother.
Okay. My mother's name was Clara Maria Sophia Becker, Becker, Thies, Thies. She was born in Bloomingdale Township, and the mailing address was Roselle, Illinois.
And now we go to your grandfather and grandmother.
My grandfather on my father's side was Heinrich Thies, Thies, and he was born in Chicago, and I'll have to look up the date.
Yeah, go ahead. That's
1856.
yeah.
And my grandmother was Sophia Federke, and she was born, probably was Addison Township. It was called Puddin Hill, on the north side of Bentonville, Illinois.
Okay.
And she was raised there.
And you wrote on this Frederick?
That's my great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather?
That would be Henry, my grandfather's father. And Frederick was born in Germany, and I probably will pronounce it incorrectly, Neindorf, Neustadt, Germany. And I believe it was 1821. I don't have the paper in front of me. And as a teenager, he came over to the United States in the 1840s. I believe it was about 1847, but I have not had a chance to look up the exact information. And he came to Chicago, where he worked for Peter Schiffler, who was a wagon maker. And he not only worked for him, but he also lived at the house with them. And in the evening, he would sometimes entertain, or we now call it babysit, the children. And he would walk them on the wooden sidewalks in their buggies. In England it's called a pram, but we call it a buggy. And one of the young ones that he took care of later became a chief of police in Chicago. And that policeman also was involved in the Haymarket riots. He was one of the police that came to help quell the Haymarket riot in Chicago. And he saved his money, and one of the first things that he purchased with his first paycheck was a set of 6 tablespoons.
Oh.
And this is one of the tablespoons that he purchased, and it looks like it is well worn. And as he accumulated money, then he started to buy property in Chicago until he had, I guess, I don't want to say considerable, but he did have several pieces of property.
Okay.
And at which time he decided to move out to the western part where the more open spaces. And because he had, in the wagon making, he had done a lot of the wooden parts of the wagon. He had the ability to make a lot of things. And then he moved out by Putten Hill. And while he was there, he started to buy land in Schaumburg Township. And the first I know for sure that I have a record that he was here was 1859. And he may have started purchasing land before that, but I know definitely by 1859 he had 60 acres. On the west side of Route 53, Rolling Road, between Nergy Road and Higgins Road. And in 1999, the WGN radio transmitter sits on part of that 60 acres of land. And then there they raised potatoes. And the potatoes were taken into Chicago and in the fall, and they were peddled, they were sold to the people in Chicago. And the people would buy the potatoes and put them away, store them for the winter. And they continued to do this through that was my great-grandfather. My grandfather did it, and my father and his brother also did it. But when they did it, they did not go as far into Chicago. They stayed more on the west side. They stayed towards River Forest. So it was really what we would call some of the suburbs today of Chicago is where they went to peddle. And they had regular customers that always bought from them. They would go to these people, and these people would always buy their potatoes. And when they had apples, they would also take the apples along, and they would sell apples. So as he continued to get money, then he ended up buying parcels of land. And my dad said that he thought that he bought it in 4 parcels until he had a total of 240 acres that stretched between Rolling Road on the east and Meacham Road on the west. On these pieces of property, there were some houses. They lived in one that was on the west side on Meacham Road, and they had a small one that was more like cabin. When the people first came, it was more like a little frame structure. And they moved that onto the farm where they were living, and they turned that into a machine shed, a shed where they kept some of their machinery so that it would be out of the rain and the snow. And then in 1891, my great-grandfather Frederick took the 240 acres and he divided it into 2 farms of 120 acres each. The east farm he gave to his son, gave or sold, I'm not sure. But Herman, his son, took that 120 acres and began to work it, and they built a house there, and that house is now where the the buildings and where the WGN transmitter is. There are some control buildings, and that's where those trees are. That's where that house was. And then the west 120 went to my grandfather Henry, also known as Heinrich, and they lived in the house there. And then Frederick and his wife Maria, they lived in a house that abutted it. they touched at the corner.
Yeah.
They were not built together, so I'm kind of wondering if this was not another house that had been on the property and they moved it there so that they could have two houses and the two families, the father, Frederick, and the son, Henry, and his wife could live side by side but be in two different houses.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So the farm was owned over 100 years by your family?
Yes. That farm, Henry married a Sophia Federkey, and they had 5 children. The oldest and youngest of those 5 children stayed on that farm until 1959. And in 1959, they had sold it, and they moved to a new house in Sycamore, Illinois. In 1935, my father and mother purchased another farm on Wheezy Road, now called Wise Road, and that was about 112 acres. So that they farmed there. So there were farmers. Our family farmed in Schaumburg from at least 1859 until 1964.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So who was the first non-farmer in your family?
The first non-farmer in my family, I guess it would be my half-brother Ray. He was Raymond Henry, was born to my father William and his first wife Amelia Bergner on August 31st in 1920. And sadly his mother died in 1926. But he went to school at St. Peter's East District School. And then he was one of the first young people from Schaumburg Township to go to Palatine Township High School. Some of the young men had gone to Ellis Business College in Elgin previously. But there was one other young man, a farm boy, that had gone to Palatine, Plonsky, Elias Plonsky. And my brother enrolled in the fall of 1934, and he went to Palatine High School. He graduated from Palatine High School, and then he went to the University of Illinois. He had a double major in agriculture and journalism. And then World War II came along, and he was drafted into the Army. And after he got out of the Army, he was editor of a newspaper on Whidbey Island by Seattle, Washington. So he was the first one that was employed off of the farm from my family that came down.
And did your parents like his choice, or was it a problem that he chose not to be a farmer or involved in farming?
I think my dad originally had hoped that he might come back and farm. But my father also promoted education, and he was very much in favor of education. And I think because my brother went off to the University of Illinois, he was well aware of the fact that he might end up doing something other than farming. But I think deep down in his heart, he hoped he would come back. But also there were times when my father had wished that he could have been a teacher. One of those things. Okay. We're back in business. Now, yours. Did you turn yours off? Okay.
what is your job? Yeah.
For 29 years, I was a teacher. For a little over 4 years, I taught 5th grade. And then I taught 4th grade for 22 years. And now I am the library media teacher at Stevenson School in Schaumburg.
Yeah.
So even though I didn't go to public school in Schaumburg, I'm back teaching in Schaumburg.
Yeah.
And I'm in charge of the library and technology, computers and LCD projectors and VCRs and video cameras and all of that. And I teach all of the children in kindergarten through 6th grade.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And on which school did you go?
When I was ready to go to school, there were no kindergartens around here, which is like before the first year of all-day school.
Yeah.
And the public school was a one-room schoolhouse, and they had 1st through 8th grades. And my father had gone to a Lutheran school, and he really wanted me to go to the Lutheran school. Mm-hmm. And they were members of St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Schaumburg. Mm-hmm. But he did not like some of the techniques mm-hmm. of the primary teacher. Mm-hmm. There were 2 classrooms at St. Peter's. And so I went to Trinity Lutheran School in Roselle mm-hmm. because my parents felt that the 2 teachers in Roselle were much better teachers. Mm-hmm. So they paid tuition for me to go to Trinity Lutheran School in Roselle. Mm-hmm. And I started 1st grade without kindergarten.
Yeah.
And jumped right in.
Good.
And since my brother was 20 years older than I,
yeah.
I didn't have anyone to play with. I didn't have any brothers or sisters at home, so everyone was concerned how I would do once I got to school, because I was on a farm by myself
yeah.
without playmates, so they didn't know how I would relate to other children.
Oh, yeah.
I adapted very quickly.
Yes, indeed. What school did you visit after high school, and which high school did you?
Okay. After I graduated from 8th grade at Trinity, I went to Palatine Township High School. Mm-hmm. At that time, there was only one high school for all of Palatine and Schaumburg Townships, but there were 2 busloads of kids from Schaumburg Township that went into Palatine. Mm-hmm. And I graduated from Palatine in 1958. And I had wanted to go to nursing school. Mm-hmm. And my father and I compromised because he wanted me to go to college. Mm-hmm. So we compromised on North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. Mm-hmm. At North Central, I could go to college for 2 years, then go to nurses training and get a BS degree as well as being a registered nurse. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere between my sophomore and junior year, things changed. And I changed my major and ended up being a teacher, mm-hmm. majoring in sciences.
And that's what you still want to be, or do you dream of something?
No, I think it's one of these things that was meant to be.
Yeah.
And I had done my student teaching with high school children. I student taught 10th and 11th graders. And I was in the summertime working at a drugstore as the bookkeeper, and the man who was managing the drugstore made an appointment for me with the superintendent of schools in Schaumburg mm-hmm. to go to talk to him because they needed teachers so badly. And I went and talked to him, and he offered me a job teaching 5th grade. Mm. And I took it, and I enjoyed it so much that I have loved teaching. I have loved what I have done since mm-hmm. the first day I started. Good. I've had some hard years with some hard classes, but mm-hmm. I still enjoy it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I would not change.
Okay. So your father was proud of you that you chose college?
Right. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college.
Yeah.
Even though my brother had been the first one to go, he did not graduate because of World War II coming along. So, yes,
Yeah.
my parents were extremely proud, and my father especially so.
Oh, yes.
And he was extremely happy that I became a teacher. I think that his love of history, I think that he even voiced it at times that he would have loved to have been a history professor in college.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure that he was even happier about it than I realized at the time when I did graduate and I did become a teacher. Yes, he was very proud.
Okay.
Very proud.
So you think your father knew that he would be the last farmer in the family?
Yes.
Okay.
He realized that. But the farm was very important to him. When he sold the farm in Schaumburg Township, it went to a syndicate of people that held the land as kind of an investment. And then it was developed into an industrial park. He immediately took the money and invested in a farm in DeKalb County because he needed to know that he had farmland. That if there was another depression or if something went wrong, he could always go onto the farm and grow his own food, had his own cow and pigs and chickens, that he could be self-sufficient again. That was very important to him.
Oh, okay.
So even before when he was so ill, he had said to me, "You should sell the farm." And I had said, "No, I think we're going to keep the farm because you are a farmer and you want to know that you have a farm. So, you're going to die having a farm." And he just smiled and said, "Thank you."
Oh.
So farming was hard work, but it was extremely important to him also.
Okay. And so we can speak about the farm a little bit.
Okay, which farm do you want to talk about? The one he was raised on or the one I was raised on? Or both?
Both.
Okay.
But so you said it was a potato farm, or was it just a part of the...
That's what they started. What my great-grandfather started growing on the land was potatoes. But after he had accumulated the 240 acres, that was just a small part of it. It was something that they continued to do as a way of earning some money.
Okay.
But the main thrust of their farming became cows and dairy. In talking to my brother last week, he said that our family was the first ones to have registered Holstein cows.
Oh, okay.
And that they always were looking for new things, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My great-grandfather then, which is Frederick, and his two sons, Herman and Henry, had the farm, and they had dairy cows, and they did milk, and they did ship their milk into Chicago. I don't know if in the early years they took it to one of the creameries that was in the area, but I do know that after the 1900s, they definitely took it to a milk stop where the wagon took it into Chicago, or I also know that they all had taken it to the train station in Medina, which is, since they lived on Meacham Road, and Meacham goes right into Medina, and it's probably 2 to 3 miles from their farm. They also at one time took the cans of milk to the railroad station for the milk train. And they shipped their milk in on the milk train with the cans with their identifying number. And then the next day the cans would come out empty and they would exchange. They would put the cans with milk on.
Yeah.
They also raised pigs, chickens, some ducks, geese.
What?
Geese.
Okay.
And probably at one time they also raised sheep. And I think that simply because I was given a box with wool in it.
Yeah.
And I think that was kept from one of the last sheep that they had had.
Okay.
And my great-grandmother had a spinning wheel. And I had the carders.
Yes.
And the spinning wheel and the skein winder that she used.
Oh, really?
And she did knit socks and other things for the family. So I have a feeling that early on they probably had a few sheep, but I don't know how many. I also have a feeling that at one time they raised flax.
Oh, okay.
Because my aunt gave me a hank of linen yarn thread that had been processed at the Roselle Linen Mill. And she said, "This is from our family." She didn't say more than that, but that insinuated to me that this flax had been taken to the mill and then this had been returned to them.
Oh, okay.
Okay. They raised corn. Oats. Both of those were fed to the animals. They also raised wheat for flour. Later on, they raised soybeans.
Yeah. Do you know when they start this?
I know definitely by the 1930s, late 30s.
Okay.
But I don't know if it was much earlier than that. They rotated their crops.
Yeah.
So that they would have corn in the field one year and oats another year. And then when they were doing soybeans, they would rotate between soybeans and corn because they complemented each other with the nutrients in the soil.
Yeah.
They had hay or alfalfa for the animals.
And thinking about how much hay, how much corn, how much oats, how was the farm divided in fields? What the main part of the corn or grain is for the animals,
Right.
and so the cows take a very small part of the farm.
Right. The pasture land was a small part of it.
Okay.
The largest crop they had was corn.
Yeah.
That probably would have been at least half of the crops that they planted.
Yeah.
And the oats might have been up to a quarter because this was fed to the chickens and also to the horses.
Oh, okay.
And it could have also been part of the supplement in with the feed for the cows. They might have thrown a little oats in with it. The wheat was grown primarily for flour.
Yeah.
So and I don't think a quarter of it. No, maybe an eighth of it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then the rest would be pasture land or hay. But the oats, they took the oats and then they baled the straw from the oats, and that was bedding for the animals.
Okay.
So the oat straw then was also put up either into the barn or into piles, and so that it could be covered, so that they could use this for dry bedding for the animals in the barns.
Okay.
So that was important too.
Yeah. So the farm was able to feed all the animals,
Right.
And the potatoes and the cows give your father and grandfather the money.
Right.
And what did they buy with that money?
They bought sugar, salt, coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Very important coffee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very important. Always had coffee going. They bought, for the women bought cloth so they could make clothes.
Yeah.
They would have to buy shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine some of the socks and things were also purchased.
Mm-hmm.
Some underwear I know was homemade,
Okay.
but I have a feeling not all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Things for inside the house. My great-grandfather did make some things for the farm. He made, when they had the ox, he made the ox yoke.
Mm-hmm.
He made a wooden drag for the farm fields because that was what he had learned when he first came over.
Yeah.
He made a day bed.
Yeah.
So he made some things, but they also had to buy furniture and the kerosene stove. They had a wood-burning stove at first, but later on they bought a kerosene stove.
Yeah.
They bought a gasoline engine to pump the water out of the well.
Yeah.
Before 1919, they had purchased a truck to use. They had to buy their buggies. Had to have, I'm sure they bartered and traded animals, but probably they had to have some money for that also.
Yeah.
And for candles and kerosene.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So basic necessities they
Yes.
have to have the money for.
No, nothing amusement or books or...
The majority of the books they had were religious or revolved around religion. They did subscribe to a German newspaper.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
And as far as amusement, doing anything, I don't even know if as far as amusement, I don't know if my great-grandparents or my grandparents went to the World's Fair of 1893. They did have a picture taken, probably in Chicago, of the whole family.
Oh, tell us the names.
Tell you the names. You're going to have to let me find the names. Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, this is my great-grandfather, Heinrich,
Yeah.
and his wife, Maria Polworth. She also came from the same area of Germany. And their children. Over here is Herman. And Herman had the east part of the farm. And his wife, Regina, and her maiden name was Federke. And this is the son, Henry, and his wife, Sophia Federke, 2 sisters, married 2 brothers.
Oh,
Okay, this is Fred.
yeah.
This is the son, Fred. I just did this wrong. This is Fred, that's right. But this is not Regina. This is Regina. This is Fred's wife, Carrie.
Okay.
And I don't know what her maiden name was. My aunt could not remember at the time. And this is Henry and his wife Sophia.
Yes.
These two are sisters that married the brothers.
Okay.
Okay? And this is Maria and her husband August Thies. And I don't know what Maria's maiden name was.
Yeah.
This is Sophie. This was the only girl. This is Sophie Thies. And she married William Fingston.
Oh.
Okay? So Sophie was the only girl of the family. And this was, I would imagine, done in Chicago. And my grandmother is wearing her wedding dress.
Oh. So it was black?
It was a black wedding dress because it was practical.
Yeah.
It could be used again. White was frivolous. She did have a white veil with
Yeah.
very nice. And what interests me is the different styles of the suits, because they would have one suit that had to last them a long time. So my great-grandfather has very wide lapels, and the boys have much smaller,
Yeah.
higher lapels.
Yes. Do you know if this one is self-made? Is it? It little bit looks like special.
I have a feeling that it was specially made. My cousin has my grandmother's wedding dress,
Yeah.
and it looks like it probably was professionally made.
Okay. Because this one a little bit looks like old skirts from the region of Schaumburg, a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they all spoke German.
Yeah.
Maria was illiterate. She could not write.
Yeah.
And that's all I really know about them.
Yeah. Oh, that's a nice picture.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
So, I imagine this was taken about 1892 because they were married in 1892.
Yeah.
And they were married in 1891. So I just have a feeling, since they have their wedding dresses on,
Yeah.
that probably is true.
When did your grandfather?
And grandmother married 1891 at St. Peter's.
And
Now, I take that back. I don't know if they married at the house and it was done by that pastor, or if they actually got married in the church.
okay, but it is
It's in the books
Yeah.
at St. Peter's
yeah,
in Schaumburg.
good. And yeah,
I can't remember what the question was. I can't remember what your question had been before that.
we were amusement, and then we go to, but I think we go a little bit back to the farm. Did your grandfather have a garden?
They had a garden. They also had an orchard with fruit trees.
Yeah.
Obviously, they had plenty of potatoes, but they also had cabbage and green beans, carrots, onions, peas, corn. No, I'm not sure if they had special sweet corn seeds or if they just ate the early farm corn,
Okay.
but they did enjoy corn.
Yeah.
They had a lot of apples, a lot of apple trees, and they dried a lot of apples. They would put it out on cheesecloth or screening, like you would have screens for windows, those things, and they would dry them.
Oh, okay.
They had pear trees and peach and a few cherry. The women always canned the vegetables and the fruits. made sauerkraut.
Did they make jam?
They made jam.
Mm-hmm.
Tomatoes. They even made tomato jelly.
Okay.
That was a family favorite, the tomato jelly.
Yeah.
And they had some grapevine.
Mm-hmm.
They had flowers. They enjoyed flowers.
Okay.
I have a yellow rose that I think originally came from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Maria Paulworth, my great-grandmother. I think her family brought it over from Germany.
Okay. You still have it?
I still have it, my friend. You can't kill it.
So now, can you a little bit describe the farm of your father and the differences between the both farms?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Where I grew up, my parents bought that in 1935. It was 111 acres.
Mm-hmm.
We did not have cows.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have cows because in the 1930s, the herd, before my mother and father had married, they had a herd of cows and they had to destroy them because of TB.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was very much of an animal person.
Okay.
And it really, really hurt him
Mm-hmm.
that the animals had to be put down.
Yeah.
And he swore that he would never have another dairy herd. We had pigs until about 1945-46. We had a lot of chickens. Chickens were raised primarily to sell eggs and or to take them to be traded for groceries.
Mm-hmm.
They would take them into the store in Roselle, and then they would get so many cents per dozen, and then that amount would be subtracted from the bill of what we were purchasing.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Had some ducks,
Mm-hmm.
had some geese, never had turkeys,
Mm-hmm.
never had sheep.
Mm-hmm.
There were plenty of pigeons, but we did not raise them for that. But my mother every now and then would have squab. She enjoyed squab, so she would do that, but that would be like once a year that she would have something like that. As far as crops are concerned, it was primarily corn,
Mm-hmm.
Oats, and my dad would put, when he was sowing the oats, he would put seed in there for a hay crop after the oats, so that he would get 2 crops out of that particular field. A small amount of wheat, probably no more than 10 to 20 acres of wheat.
Mm-hmm.
Soybeans, and they were rotated.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the wintertime, he would fatten steers. He would go to Aurora or Montgomery, which is near Aurora,
Mm-hmm.
and he would get 30 to 35 steers, the neutered bulls, and he would fatten them up over the winter and then sell them in spring before he had to do a lot of the field work.
Oh, okay.
And he would feed them grist. He would grind up corn, and we had our own hammer mill.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would grind corn and put some supplemental things in with that,
Mm-hmm.
and some hay from the field,
Mm-hmm.
and he would fatten the cattle that way using the corn. Until about 1945, we had a team of horses,
Mm-hmm.
Bob and Barney, and used them for light work. The one warm summer day in July, one of the horses got out in the morning and got into the fresh oats and bloated and died. And so after that, Dad sold the other one, and that was the end of horses. So then everything was over to Yes, to tractors and
Yeah.
such. The main difference between the two farms, when my dad was on the other farm, they did a lot of the farm work with horses,
Mm-hmm.
and we had tractors. They had dairy. We did not.
Yeah. Do you think it's typical for the generation of your father that they change from dairies to something else?
It was very typical. It became more and more impractical. They had developed fertilizers,
Yeah.
and my father and his brother were kind of into experimenting with things.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they came out with the commercial fertilizer, they used that with the manures.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they started doing that, the amount of corn, the production level went up tremendously.
Okay.
And they soon learned that they could make more money by investing in the fertilizers and better farming techniques.
Yeah.
They could produce more, their productivity level increased so that they could sell more. So it was more profitable to do that
Yeah.
than to do the cows, which were labor intensive. They had to be very careful with the sanitation, and there were a lot of, and rightly so, a lot of steps in keeping things clean and the milk testing and everything like this, that it just became more practical for them to go into more of raising of crops.
Yeah. Okay.
They also did a lot of ditching and tiling, so in some areas where it was low, they would put tiles in and that would drain the area so that they could raise more crops in that. Some of the older generation felt that they were taking away from the water that was needed for the crops. They didn't look at this as a way to increase the crop production. So that was, both my father and his brother read a lot.
Yeah.
And they were fairly intelligent. And if it made sense to them that this would be something that would benefit their farming practices, then they would try it. Such as hybrid seeds, which were better quality seeds. They were some of the first to use hybrid seed corn too.
Yeah. So you think your father and his brother were the first generation or the first farmers that go over tradition and try something with technique and okay.
And they also were willing to try tractors and to try different machines too.
Yeah.
It didn't scare them. And maybe one of the reasons why is because their father died in 1901 when they were very young. They did not have an older man that was forcing, I don't use, maybe forcing is a bad word. Well, I'm going to use it, but forcing his ideas on his son.
Yeah.
These were intelligent young men that listened and talked and read a lot and thought for themselves and thought some of these things were good ideas. So maybe not having a father worked to their benefit. I hadn't thought about that before, but that very well could be.
So the brother of your father was the older one?
Yes.
And he took the farm of your grandfather?
Right.
Okay. And can you describe a normal day in the life of your father on the farm?
What?
Something like when he stands up what he eat when he stand up, have breakfast, and
Okay, what age? Any particular age?
oh, okay.
Because, when he was in his 30s, it would have been different because of the cows than when he was in his 40s.
You can make two. One
Okay.
when he was on the dairy farm,
Okay.
and later.
Okay, when he was on the dairy farm, they would get up no later than 6 o'clock, and they would go out and milk the cows and feed them, water them. Then they would come in and have breakfast, which most likely would have included some form of meat, like a bacon or a ham, eggs, fried potatoes, and perhaps homemade bread, and of all, coffee,
Oh, that's a lot.
boiled coffee,
Yeah, boiled coffee.
boiled coffee. And then they would go out and they would take care of the horses.
Yeah.
And then there were planting time. They would be preparing the field, so they would spend all day in the field.
Yeah.
And at the time they had horses, it was all done by horses, and so the horses were very important to them. They would come in for lunch, and lunch would be the big meal of the day. So there would be meat, potatoes, vegetables in season as it was fall, then there was some kind of canned vegetable was brought up,
Yeah.
so that they would have that. They might also have like canned peaches or canned pears, homemade bread, coffee, and probably cookies for dessert.
Okay.
Middle of the afternoon, if they were close to home, they would come in and have a sandwich. But if they were not going to be, if they were going to be in a field that was farther away from home, they would take a sandwich along and a quart jar of coffee. And then they would come in and they would have to do their milking. They would have to, take care of the horses, bed them down for the night. They'd come in, have their supper, which would include fried potatoes, leftover meat from the noon meal, and basically leftovers from the noon meal.
Okay.
So whatever was prepared for noon, they usually had as leftovers for the evening meal. Unless there were very few leftovers, and they would have something like Rennebush and Velkenbrot. And that was especially true in the wintertime. That was a very typical wintertime evening meal, Rennebush and Velkenbrot. And then probably a pie, because fruit pies were very, very popular in this area. And then so they would read the paper in the evening, because they had the Chicago Tribune delivered. It came in the mail. And that's basically how they got their education, because they did not go beyond 8th grade. And my father read a lot.
Yeah.
He was very interested in politics, very interested in what was going on.
Yeah.
And after 1937, they would listen to the radio in the evening. And on the Wheezy Road farm, he would still get up early. But let's say that it was fall. He would go out and feed the steers, make sure they had water, come in, have breakfast, which usually included eggs, fried potatoes and bread, coffee. And then he would take me to school.
Oh, yeah.
Because there were no school buses. And then he would come back and he would, I'm just giving an example of a fall day, pick corn.
Pick corn.
Pick corn. Go with the corn picker. And the corn picker was with the tractor, so that was all mechanized. And then as soon as he had a couple of wagons full of corn, he would bring it back and he would unload that into the corn crib. And these would be ears of corn. And then probably would be about lunchtime, so he would have lunch. Now, when I was in school, it switched. Then it was not the big meal at noon. The big meal was in the evening. So probably leftovers from the day before, which included a meat, a vegetable, potatoes, fried potatoes, food dishes. Now we stop to think how many potatoes we eat.
And how many coffee you drink?
Yeah, coffee, homemade bread.
Yeah.
Or my mother was big on making coffee cakes. So probably coffee cake. And then you go back out in the field and do that same thing. About 3:30, pick me up from school. And then he'd keep on working till about 5:30. Come back in, feed the cattle, have the main meal of the day, which again was meat, potatoes, vegetables, homemade bread, and some kind of dessert, and coffee, and I did drink milk. And then he would go out and load the corn. And then if he was awake, he listened to the radio or he read the newspaper.
Bedtime?
Bedtime, usually no later than 10 o'clock.
Okay. That is a long day.
That is a long day.
Yeah.
You're right. Well, he didn't have any sons to help him, so he did it.
Yeah.
And when I was old enough to drive the tractor, I would go out after he got me home, then I would take another tractor out and bring the wagons in.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't allow me to unload them. So there's some of this, like we've heard before, women were allowed to do so much, you know, and
yeah, that's it.
yes, no physical labor.
No. Thies is a German name.
Yes.
And did your family speak about their German roots?
They spoke about their German roots. But they were very proud to be Americans.
Okay.
Sometime, I think it was in the 1930s, and it was before I was born, they had gotten word that they had inherited some land in Germany, but they did not have enough money to go over to claim the inheritance.
Oh, okay.
So, and because my great-grandfather came over by himself and he never went back, I don't know how much contact he had with his family.
Yeah.
But my dad would talk about Germany. He would not with a desire to go there, but he talked about it fondly. He was proud of his German heritage. He had listened to the adults because his father died when he was 5.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of time with his grandfathers, and consequently, he was one who listened, and he took in a lot of information, and he retained it. So he had listened well to them. So he was very proud of being the German heritage, but he also
was proud to
be an American.
That's That's a difficult way of feeling.
It is.
What I mean, especially in situations like the war. So
The war was difficult. Because they spoke German.
Yeah.
I was the first generation that did not speak German.
Yeah. I try to understand how the people thought about this, living in America, proud to be an American, and at the same time they were proud of being a German.
Right.
So, do you think they have some special German behavior, like stubbornness? It's a stereotype, you know?
Stereotype, yes, but true.
Okay.
Yes, there is a streak of stubbornness, of having this idea that this is correct, and this is the way it should be. So yes, there is stubbornness, as you might say. I don't know how else to phrase it, because they do have, and I see it in myself. I dig in.
Yeah.
You know, this is what I stand for. This is it.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, so you are proud of some characteristics.
I'm accepting.
Okay.
I can't say that I would brag that I'm stubborn, but I accept that this is something that I have, either being with my parents so much and being, because my mother's heritage is all German, and so is my father's, so my heritage is 100% German.
Yeah.
Where my sons are not. They're the first generation that's not going to have 100% German heritage. I accept this. It's just part of me.
Yes.
It's part of what I grew up with. And I would not try to hide it.
Okay. And you married an Englishman?
I married an Englishman.
And did your father mention any time that he feels that this is unusual, or?
No,
it was usual.
My father had a very open mind about that. If I loved him and he loved me and we seemed to be very compatible, that it was fine. That he probably would have wished that I had married a farmer over marrying, you know.
Yeah.
But this was fine. No, they were very close.
Good.
They were very close. So I think he was accepting of that. He never ever said anything about you should be dating only people of German heritage, or you should only be dating someone who's going to be a farmer.
Do you think there were times in Schaumburg Township people behaved like this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Definitely. And they looked wearily at people who were not of German, who were outsiders, who were of a different heritage. And we had across the street on Weasley Road, there was a couple, Bill and Pearl Collada. They had rented about 10 acres. Across the street from us on Weasley Road, there was a couple, Bill and Pearl Collada, Polish extraction. They had rented about 10 acres of land and were living there, and lived there for probably 5 or 6 years, and became friends of my parents. And they were Catholic. And there were some people in the community that were making some not very pleasant comments to and about them. And my father came to their defense, and he stood up for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a close-knit Lutheran community. I did not know another church existed until I was in school.
Yeah.
Because both families, both my mother's side and my father's side, one was from St. Peter's in Schaumburg and the other one from Trinity and Roselle.
Yeah.
And so my whole world revolved around that and all the family doing. Confirmations and baptisms and everything.
Was religion a big part of daily life, or was it something just on Sunday?
I can't say that we had time for daily Bible readings, but they did start telling me Bible stories at home when I was little.
Yeah.
Especially my mother, who had more time for that kind of thing. Sundays was church at St. Peter's, German service.
Really?
Really.
How long? I mean, when they stopped speaking German?
They still had at least one German service a month into the 50s.
Oh.
Yeah. Consequently, when there were German services, I was lost because they had made such an effort not to have me speak German that I was really lost.
Oh, who would it say to you not to speak German?
They didn't say don't speak German. They just didn't teach it to me. When my mother and father spoke German, it was in the evening after I went to bed.
Oh, I see.
And she spoke High German, and my father spoke Slavic.
Yeah.
No, that's how you say it. But my father could speak either one, and I think my mother could too.
Yeah.
My father's mother, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, died when I was 7. And when I would go to see her, she would want me to say something to her in German. So after she died, then there was no one that encouraged me to speak German at all.
Yeah, good.
I don't know. Sometimes I don't think it was so good. I would like to have dual language.
Okay, yeah. So that's good.
As an adult, I can say that.
Yes. When you were a child, can you describe how it was walking through Schaumburg Center? What did you see on the right and the left?
As you would come north on Roselle Road going into Schaumburg Center, on the right-hand side there was a house just before you started to go up the hill. And then after that is what now is called the Buttery. And I can't remember that there was anything active going on at that building at the time that I was growing up. And then after that there was a little gasoline station. And then there were a couple of houses. The last one was the Neiman House. And then there was the tavern, Lango's Tavern. And then Lake Hook Farm Supply, which is where my dad would go to get chicken feed or some fertilizer, sometimes, or seeds if he needed it. It was part of the Farm Bureau, the Lake Hook Farm Supply. And then after that was Neiman's Tavern on the corner. Now it's Shamrose Inn. And I was not allowed to go into the taverns. My father was not much of a beer drinker. He only drank beer when they were baling hay or they were shelling corn or filling silo, then he would have a beer or two with the men, but he never drank a lot of beer, so we didn't go in there. The bank building was a little store. That would be on the northeast corner of Schomburg and Roselle Road. There was a little grocery store in there. And then on the other side of that, there was a house and a barn, and I don't know who lived there. But then it was open land until you got to the golf course.
There was a golf course?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was a golf course. The golf course that's there now was there then.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you remember when they opened it?
No, it was open for as long as I can remember. The first time I ever went there was for a wedding for June and Bob Dunbar's wedding reception.
Yeah.
And I must have been about 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So for all the time that I can remember it, it's been there.
And who played golf?
Not the farmers. They thought it was silly to chase around that little white ball.
Yeah.
You know, they did enough physical work. They didn't need to do anything with that. So it was people who came out from towns that played golf. And so going back to the south side, then on the west side of the road to the left, there was, on the top of the hill, there was a house and barn. And then there was another house that in later years was yellow, and I want to say that maybe part of the Trost family lived there. And where the clock tower is now, there was nothing. Okay, but to the west of the clock tower, there were a couple of houses west on Schomburg Road, and then across from those houses, there was the single schoolhouse, the one-room schoolhouse that had all 8 grades in it. And the only time I was in it was for 4-H meetings. And then north of Schomburg Road, it was open land. The farm field.
Yeah. So now we go Schomburg Road.
Okay.
And cross Nergy Road. What can you see there when you were little? Schomburg
Road.
And
Nergy's over there.
Nergy? Yeah. Nergy?
Oh, Roselle Road and Nergy?
Yeah.
Ah. Roselle Road and Nergy. Okay. As you're going south towards Roselle Road, there were some houses after Wise Road. There was a little subdivision, and there were like 3 or 4 streets in there. And there were some small houses scattered in there. And they all had their own well and septic. And there was a variety of people living there. The Thompsons, the Bushings, the Kragers are just some that come to my mind. Johnsons later, Sampsons. It was kind of lower middle class area with very simple houses. And then at the corner of Nergy and Roselle, and the southwest corner was Old Settlers Inn, another tavern. And they also served some food. And they had a little hall that sometimes served as a reception area for weddings or anniversaries. On the northeast corner was the Piskey farm, and the Piskeys were truck farmers. They raised potatoes, onions, tomatoes, radishes, beans, all kinds of things which they took into South Water Street Market. In the summertime, they raised the produce for taking to Chicago for this area. And to the east of the Ed Piskeys was the Alvin Piskeys, and they did the same thing. And on the southeast corner, there was nothing. It was farmland.
Did you ever walk on the street, on each side, farmland, and how was it silent?
Very silent.
Very silent.
Sometimes I would ride my bike into Roselle for school, and I would go down Wise Road to the east, down the hill till I got to Roselle Road, and then go south into Roselle. And I could ride the 2.5 miles and meet maybe one car. No traffic. The only people that traveled were people that had a reason to be there, going to a farm or from a farm going into town to get something. You could hear the train whistle of the train passing through Roselle.
Okay.
The farmers in the field knew the train schedules, so they could tell what time it was just by hearing the whistle.
Oh, yeah.
St. Peter's Church in Schaumburg would toll the bell when someone died. So if you knew of anyone who was sick or an older person, and you started counting when the bell was being tolled, they told it for the number of years the person was old. So if they told it 52 times, there was someone who was 52 years old. If they told it 76 times, there was 76-year-olds. So you could kind of almost guess who it might be if someone had been ill or suffering.
Yeah.
If you were with a team of horses and you were working, you could hear the leather of the harnesses and the swishing of the tails as they were swishing away the flies.
Yeah.
It was very silent.
Okay.
Every now and then you might see a plane go overhead, especially during World War II, when O'Hare was called Orchard Field, and they would have planes, Air Force planes coming out from Orchard Field. So you might see them practicing. Sometimes they would practice touch and goes in our fields. We had back 40, and one year my dad had that 40 acres of oats, the whole 40 acres, and he had windrowed it so that in the corners there was nothing because all the rows were on the sides, and they would go diagonally, and they would touch down in the center and then pull up. And on days like that, my mother and I would take dinner, lunch out, and we would have a picnic lunch out in the field so we wouldn't have to come in. And we're sitting in the shade of the tree, and this pilot's practicing touch and goes in all different directions. And when he was finished, he pulled up and waggled his wings, and then went off like, "Thank you," and off he went.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very silent.
Yeah. Okay.
Very peaceful.
Yeah. Do you sometimes wish Schaumburg would be still a community of farmers?
Some days.
So you miss it?
I miss it. It was a wonderful time, a wonderful place to grow up. I miss it.
Okay. Do you think it's a loss for us that the agricultural era is gone?
I worry sometimes that we're taking so much of the fertile land, and this was fertile land, good, black, fertile land, and we're stripping that off, and we're building houses, and we're not thinking to the future. It does worry me.
So what do you think we have lost and you miss it, and what can you...
Well, I've lost part of my identity, my heritage, because I call myself a farm girl. You know, I may have lived in the suburban setting since 1965. So we're talking over 30 years, more than half of my life. But my fondest, happiest memories are still of the farm. And stress-free. I don't think my father would have said it was stress-free, but it was for me. Stress-free living without the pressure cooker kinds of pressures that are on us now to be here, be there, do this, do that. It was a more relaxed. I think it was better for the soul.
Okay.
And better for the people. Very rewarding to turn over the dirt, to smell the fresh earth, to put seeds in and watch them sprout and grow and produce a crop and harvest it. It's a wonderful feeling. Yeah, I miss it.